This video captures our recent road trip to all 4 national parks in Colorado. We spent more than half of our time hiking some of the amazing trails in the beautiful Rocky Mountain National Park. Then, we headed to the Great Sand Dunes, Mesa Verde, and finally, the Black Canyon of the Gunnison. Our objective upon arrival was to get acclimatized gradually for the higher altitude. We decided to take our first short hike to Gem Lake and Twin Owls near our campground right outside of the Rocky Mountain National Park. Wow, we were truly amazed how this guy got up there. After gaining almost 1,000 feet, we reached Gem Lake at 8,830 feet. The lake itself is actually small. However, this was important to help us to be comfortable for the next few days, as we definitely felt the elevation physically during this hike. Now on to the next short trail. Here's the view of the Twin Owl from the trail. After we finished the hike outside the national park, we decided to test our physical at a higher elevation on an even shorter trail inside the park that starts at the Alpine Visitor Center. This 0.6-mile trail starts at 11,796 feet and ends at 12,005 feet. We arrived at the trail head in the afternoon and experienced firsthand about the Rocky Mountain weather. It was a perfect sunny day upon entering the park, but it changed quickly as we drove. We had blue skies at one turn, followed by dark clouds at another. The winds, the thunder, and even snow rolled in quickly as we started inside. Beautiful rainbow showed up on our way back. Day 2, our goal was to hike the 6.5-mile trail that takes us to 5 different lakes. We arrived at the Bear Lake Trail head early in the morning for an early start to avoid any afternoon showers. The reflection on the Bear Lake in the early morning was super calm, and if you look closely, there were fogs on the lake surface which still awaited to be burnt out by the sun. These floating vegetations on the Nymph Lake surface could be some kind of water lily. It can definitely make this lake even more pretty if all the flowers blossom at the same time. Now here is the Dream Lake. The trail follows upstream of this creek and takes us to the Emerald Lake. The Emerald Lake was super calm, and it was a bit hard to tell where the reflections actually started. Seeing this turquoise-colored Hiaha Lake at the end of our hike was the best reward. This hike was absolutely worth the effort. The total elevation gain was close to 2,500 feet, with the highest elevation of over 10,300. Day 3, our goal was to explore the Deer Mountain Trail, and we were hoping the weather would allow us to see the long peak at the summit. This should be easier than yesterday's hike, as the elevation gain is about 1,300 feet, and the total distance is only about 6 miles. The summit view was breathtaking, although there seemed to be thunderstorms approaching the mountains in the distance. In the distance, we were able to see the Twin Peaks as well as the infamous Long Peak. The close-up of the Long Peak under the dark clouds with the iconic keyhole. Day 4 was perhaps the most challenging hike. We got up early to embark on the Flat Top Mountain and the Hallett Peak. This trail has a total elevation gain of over 3,000 feet, with a total distance of 10.5 miles. The majority of this trail was pretty much steady climbing, indeed quite challenging. There were a patch of snowfield we had to pass after we got above the tree line. We were thrilled that we finally reached the summit of the Flat Top Mountain, and the Hallett Peak can now be clearly viewed from here. The 360 view from the Flat Top Mountain was dramatic on this clear day, as we can see miles away. We still have a couple of 100 meters to get to the Hallett Peak. The cairn's trail marks from here onwards were somewhat hard to follow because there were rocks everywhere. This is the medallion on the Hallett Peak. The luxury of resting at 12,713 feet elevation does not come by easily for us. The view here was absolutely stunning and unforgettable. Now we have to get our butt back down to the parking lot, which could be tougher than climbing. The trekking poles were a big help on the way down this section. We spent more time enjoying the scenery on the way back as we have plenty of time. This trail is indeed very beautiful and challenging. Day 5 was our last day for climbing, and we were aiming for the Sky Pond via Alberta Falls Trail. The elevation gain was about 1,800 feet, easier compared to the Hallett Peak. The trail led us to the loch. It felt tranquil walking alongside this beautiful lake. Seeing the small waterfall on the left of the screen indicated we are actually getting close to the lake. Maybe after crossing this snow patch? We'll find out shortly. The final section of this trail was the most challenging as it required all 4 limbs to work together, trying to find good places to grab and step on those wet boulders. Hidden behind the difficult section, this marvelous blue sky pond sits high above and surrounded by the beautiful Rocky Mountains. On our way down, the ski track marks on the snow-covered wedge of the mountain reminded us that we caught a glimpse of a skier actually skiing downhill from the flat-top mountain. A cold bath in the clear water was definitely a good treat to the feet that worked so hard. Alberta Falls was a perfect stopping place to get some rest from the continuous descent. It sure felt good having the loud water sound in the background, breathing in the air with the mist while eating our snacks. This was the perfect last stop before we concluded this hike. Before departing the Rocky Mountains, we spent a day at the Estes Park, which sits right at the foot of the Rocky Mountain. It is a small but pretty town in Colorado that attracts skiers and tourists in both winter and summer. The river ran through the city, and you can find interesting shops and restaurants on the Riverwalk. These metal benches on the riverbank are so beautiful, aren't they? One thing is guaranteed here in Estes Park is that you don't need binoculars to search for elks, as we spotted them multiple times at the campground, along the river, as well as in the residential areas. Knoll Willows Trail leads to the ruins of the Albert Birch Bungalow, which dates back to the early 20th century. It offers views of Estes Park, Lake Estes, and the surrounding mountains, such as Longs Peak and the Front Range Mountains of Rocky Mountain National Park. We arrived at the Great Sand Dunes National Park on day 7. Nestled against the rugged Sangria de Cristo Mountains, these North America's tallest dunes are the focal point of wild nature system of high mountain peaks, sparkling streams, forceful wind, and billions of sand grains. Unfortunately, we didn't spend much time here due to the extreme heat and mosquitoes. Mesa Verde National Park is also a World Heritage Site. Here you can find cliff dwellings, which were homes to about 40,000 ancestors of today's pueblos and tribes at its peak in the years of 1200. People lived in the alcoves for generations as it provided natural shelter, and many had a convenient water source from seep springs. The Cliff Palace is huge and well preserved. We were lucky that we could get a pretty good view from the distance above, as we didn't know a reservation was required to get down and see it up close. The balcony house is the structure right below the arched cliff. It was also constructed to house multiple families. All of these cliff dwellings are testaments to the skills of the engineers who built them. This park protects the rich cultural heritage of 27 pueblos and tribes. Here at the Cliff Canyon, dwellings can be seen at multiple different levels of the cliff. We walked through the Knife Edge Trail in the evening of our night stay here. This is a very easy 2-miler, perfect choice as a family activity after dinner, since the trailhead is a short walk from the campground. On day 9, before we depart from this park, we hiked the Point Lookout Trail, which involves steep switchbacks climb from Moorfield Canyon to the top of the Point Lookout, which is the iconic geological formation towering above the park entrance. Here were the amazing views of the San Juan and La Plata Mountains, and the Mancos and Montezuma valleys from the lookout. We arrived at the Black Canyon National Park in the late afternoon on day 9, and immediately impressed by the dark-colored deep canyon, as well as how straight of the cliff wall is. We planned to stay 2 nights here and mainly focus on the South Rim, as the North Rim is far from the highway with limited services. This is the Gunnison Point, which is right below the South Rim Visitor Center. The course of the Gunnison River determined by the location of high mountain ranges 2 million years ago. The river began cutting through the uplift's core with rocks, gravel, and sediment. Empowered by floodwaters, it gained speed through a steep descent from the surrounding mountains. It wielded huge boulders that scoured trees and chiseled the canyon bottom, which had not yet been reached. On the canyon wall, the lighter colored layers are pegmatite, whereas the darker colored layers are gneiss. There are many viewpoints along the South Rim Road, and the color of the canyon walls could be very different depending on where the sunlight is coming from. Painted Wall is the tallest vertical cliff in Colorado at 2,250 feet and is among the highest in the U.S. The Empire State Building would only reach slightly more than halfway to the top of the cliff if placed at the bottom of the canyon. After a solid 10 days in these 4 national parks, our favorite, without any doubt, was the Rocky Mountain National Park, simply because we love to hike the mountains. We also enjoyed all the other parks, although our time involved was very limited. That's all for this video. Thank you so much for viewing.